Captain Aidan Gray, along with his research team, was making their way across the frozen surface of planet K-27. This was one of the galaxy's most distant and dangerous corners. The thin and harsh atmosphere required the most advanced equipment to survive. Gray noticed a glimmer of light amid the ice-covered plains. There shouldn't have been any signs of life on this planet. The team cautiously approached the glimmer. As Gray drew closer, he realized that the light was emanating from a protective shield. Inside, a small figure was left on the ground. As they got closer, they saw that the figure was a newborn baby, wrapped in a blanket and protected from the cold. Finding it in this state filled Gray with indescribable curiosity and concern. Gray carefully disabled the shield and took the baby into his arms. He immediately recognized the baby as an alien. Its skin was a faint blue and its eyes emitted an unusual bright light. However, this strangeness did not diminish its innocence and fragility. Gray could feel the baby's loneliness. Far from wanting to harm it, he was overwhelmed with the instinct to protect it. Through a telepathic impression left by the baby, Gray learned that its name was Elior, and that it had fallen to this planet while fleeing a disaster. The baby's family was lost, and now it was completely alone. Gray decided to do everything in his power to keep this innocent being alive and provide it with a safe haven. When Gray brought Elior back to the ship, some of his crew were deeply unsettled by the newborn alien. Just hours ago, they had been on a research mission. Now they had a foreign entity aboard that inspired no trust. The presence of the baby quickly escalated into open conflict among the crew. Johnson, one of the crew members, confronted Gray and said sternly, "What do you think you're doing bringing this baby here, Captain? We don't know what this thing is. It could be a threat that could destroy us." Gray, holding Elior tightly, replied angrily, "Johnson, this is a baby. Can't you see it's defenseless? We're human, we have to help," he said. Johnson smirked derisively. "Being human doesn't mean being foolish, Gray. This creature could pose a threat to us. Bringing it aboard the ship has put us all at risk," he said. These words intensified the tension on the ship. Other crew members joined in the argument. Some sided with Johnson, while others supported Gray. The discussion escalated, and voices were raised. Gray, momentarily uncertain by Johnson's words, looked back at Elior and remembered its innocence. "I don't have time to argue with you, Johnson. Leaving it here would be insane. If you want to stay on this ship, you will respect my decisions," he said. Johnson, angrily advancing, grabbed Gray by the wrist and pulled him. "I won't blindly follow your decisions. You have no right to endanger the ship," he said. Gray responded to Johnson's move, wrenching his wrist free and pushing him back. "You won't gain anything by attacking me. This baby is our responsibility. We need to protect it," he said. Meanwhile, other crew members stepped in to break up the fight. One held Gray back, while another restrained Johnson, trying to calm both sides. However, the tension remained high. "Gray, this isn't a responsibility, it's a burden. And a very dangerous burden," Johnson said, breathless. "Are you ready for the consequences?" Gray looked intently into his eyes and said firmly, "Yes, I'm ready. Leaving it here and walking away would be a betrayal of our humanity." Maria, a crew member, intervened and turned towards Johnson. "Johnson, the captain is right. This baby doesn't seem like a threat. We're human, we should show compassion," she said. Johnson, angrily waving his hand, said, "Compassion? Is that what's going to keep us alive in the darkness of space? Compassion will get us killed, can't you see?" Gray held Elior tightly once more. "If humanity is going to abandon protecting the innocent in the face of danger, then we're already dead," he said. These words momentarily paused Johnson. The uncertainty in his eyes turned to resolve as he faced Gray. "I hope you're not wrong, Captain. Because if you are, we'll all pay a heavy price," he said, stepping back. The tension among the crew was far from over, but Gray was once again certain he had done the right thing. He stroked Elior's head and said, "I will protect you. No matter what, I will protect you. However, when they returned to the ship, they received a signal from the depths of space. There's something wrong here, Gray said, turning to his team. The source of this signal doesn't look friendly at all. Johnson turned to him angrily. This is why we told you, Captain. We shouldn't have brought the baby aboard. Now we've got trouble, he said. Gray stared sharply into Johnson's eyes. Now is not the time for arguments, Johnson. We need to prepare, he said. The signal had been sent by a being tracking Elir. This being was a hunter who had destroyed Elir's species and was now coming to finish the job. As Gray realized the approaching threat while tracking the signal source, he understood it might already be too late. The crew began preparations to defend against the impending danger. As the hunter approached the ship, Gray and his team completed their preparations. However, this entity was the strongest enemy they had ever faced. Elir looked at Gray, sensing how important it was to him. He was determined to do whatever was necessary to protect it. At that moment, the source of the signal, the hunter, was closing in on the ship. The radar alarms suddenly blared. Gray saw a massive warship approaching them rapidly on the monitor. Everyone, take your positions. Gray shouted. This ship isn't here to take Elir. It's here to destroy us. Chaos erupted on the ship. Weapon systems were activated, shields were raised to maximum. Johnson turned to Gray and said, "This is your fault. If we hadn't brought the baby here, none of this would be happening." Gray, struggling to keep his patience with Johnson while searching for a solution to protect Elir, said, "This might be the biggest threat we've ever faced, but we don't have time to fight among ourselves." As the ship entered the enemy warship's range, the first shots were fired. The hunter began attacking the ship with high-energy lasers. The ship shook, and the lights flickered. Gray turned to the bridge and shouted, "Strengthen the shields. Open fire." The crew members complied with Gray's orders as a massive battle commenced. The hunter ship delivered powerful blows that nearly tore the ship apart with each attack. Gray turned to the weapons officer and said, "Target them and return fire with full power." The ship's lasers began firing at the enemy vessel. However, the enemy ship was much stronger than anticipated. Gray's ship continued to be rocked by the blows. Johnson shouted at Gray, "We can't win this battle. Because of the baby, we're all going to die." Suppressing his anger, Gray turned to Johnson. "This baby is our responsibility. If it's being hunted, the only way to end this fight is to protect it," he said. At that moment, the enemy ship launched a torpedo. Gray's ship was jolted by the impact of the torpedo, and control panels short-circuited. Panicking, Johnson said, "We're losing the ship. We need to escape immediately." Gray clung to the control panel and said, "It's not over yet. There must be a way to defeat them." The condition of the ship was dire, shields were nearly down, and energy levels were dangerously low. The enemy ship relentlessly targeted them. Another attack from the enemy shook the ship violently. Gray scanned the damage reports on the control panel while trying to keep the situation under control. "The shields are about to collapse, Captain," said the technician, his voice trembling. "Activate the emergency power system." Gray shouted. "And direct all remaining energy to the weapon systems." Johnson turned to Gray with anger. "This is madness, Gray. You're going to kill us all. We need to escape." Gray could see the fear on Johnson's face, but he was not willing to back down. "If we run, they'll chase us down and hunt us. We need to stay here and fight," Gray said with determination. At that moment, another torpedo was fired from the enemy ship. Gray's ship was further jolted by this attack. The lights went out, and alarm sounds echoed. "Heavy damage in the engine room," said the engineering officer. "If we take another hit, the engines will fail." Gray shut his eyes tightly and thought for a moment. Running away was an option, but he wasn't going to succumb to Johnson's fears. Lock all weapons on target, Gray said, his voice trembling. We're making one last shot. The crew hesitated but followed Gray's orders. The weapons officer locked onto the target and pressed the button. With the ship's remaining energy, the shot was fired towards the enemy vessel. However, the enemy ship maneuvered and evaded the shot before it could hit. We missed, the weapons officer shouted. Gray stared at the screen in horror. This is impossible, he said. That was our last chance. As the enemy ship prepared for a new attack, panic spread among Gray's crew. Johnson turned to Gray again and said, "We need to escape now, Gray. The only way to get everyone out alive is to leave." But Gray refused to give up. "No," he said, his voice wavering. "We have to find a way. We can win this fight." The ship shook violently, causing Gray to lose his balance and fall to the ground. As he got up, his eyes fixed on the control panel. The enemy ship was gathering energy for a final assault. Gray felt his heart racing. They were too late to escape. This final attack could destroy them entirely. Johnson, with a defeated tone, said, "Gray, we can't survive this." Breathless, Gray realized just how desperate the situation was. However, he refused to quit. "We can't give up so easily. There must still be a way," he said, though his voice was now uncertain. As the distance between them and the enemy ship closed, he knew everything was about to end. As the enemy ship prepared to fire, a deathly silence fell over the ship. Gray closed his eyes and tried one last time to think of a solution, but all options seemed exhausted. The weight of their situation was affecting the entire crew. As a last resort, they had no choice but to channel all remaining energy to the shields. Gray stood on the edge of making a tough decision, to give up or to fight until the end. "This isn't going to end so easily," Gray said, opening his eyes and looking at his crew one last time. "Raise the shields to maximum and prepare for a counterattack." The crew gathered their last bit of energy as Gray's small spark of hope remained. They might have reached the end of this battle, but it was not time to give up yet. As the enemy ship's final assault approached, Gray and his crew prepared for this last clash. "Now fire. Use all our weapons," he commanded. The ship's weapons fired all at once. The enemy ship was left vulnerable to this sudden and powerful attack. However, in the midst of the battle, Gray noticed the tension among the crew escalating. Johnson shouted to the weapons officer, "Don't listen to him. We can't win this battle. We need to escape." The weapons officer hesitated. Gray turned to Johnson angrily. "You can't sabotage me, Johnson. I'm the captain of this ship, and you will follow my orders," he said. Johnson stood up to Gray. "You're ruining this ship, Gray. I have to stop you," he said, throwing a punch at Gray. Gray dodged Johnson's punch and pushed him back. "By doing this, you're only preparing your own end," he said. A fierce fight broke out between them. While Gray struggled with Johnson, he also tried to maintain control of the ship. At that moment, the sharp sound of crying pierced through the tense atmosphere of the ship. Gray briefly lifted his head from the control panel and scanned the room. Maria was holding the wrapped-up Ilya in her arms. The baby was crying loudly as if aware of everything happening around. Maria gently rocked him, saying, "Shoo, calm down, little one," her voice full of concern. But Ilya's crying grew louder and something incredible happened. Suddenly, a wave of energy emanated from the baby and filled the room. The crew was stunned by this sudden energy surge. Gray, in shock, turned back to the control panel, but this time the screens displayed something different. The ship's energy levels had suddenly surged. All systems were operating beyond their normal capacity. How is this possible?" Gray said in astonishment. Maria was still trying to calm Ilya, but as the energy wave from the baby grew, the ship's systems were being revived. Shields strengthened, and the weapon systems reached maximum capacity. Johnson stared at Ilya with wide eyes. "Is the baby causing this?" he asked, his voice trembling. Gray quickly returned to the control panel and assessed the situation. The enemy ship was taken aback by this sudden change. Their energy signals had momentarily scrambled, disrupting their attack plans. "Yes, it's him," Gray said with determination. "Ilya is helping us." Gray took a deep breath and focused on the control panel. "Lock all weapons on the enemy ship and fire." The crew carried out the order without delay. Thanks to Ilya's power, the ship's weapons were more powerful than ever. Every shot they fired inflicted heavy damage on the enemy ship. Gray assessed the situation and intensified their attacks. The enemy ship was reeling from this unexpected counterattack. Its shields were quickly weakening, and the hull was starting to break apart. Gray ordered his crew to make one final assault. "Put all power into one last shot," he commanded. A beam of energy from the ship struck the enemy vessel directly in the center. In an instant, the enemy ship exploded and vanished into the depths of space. Gray took a deep breath and slumped into his seat. "We did it," he said, still in shock. At that moment, they realized that Ilya was not just a being, but a source of energy. In the moment of victory, they saw Ilya's body beginning to dissolve. When Gray asked Ilya what was happening, the baby gave him a smile and explained the truth: "I am a beacon of hope. But now, my mission is complete." Ilya was not just a baby but an energy source created by a galactic being. His mission was to destroy the enemy and save Gray's life. His presence had only been a temporary aid. Ilya smiled one last time, held Gray's hand, and then vanished completely. Gray looked at the empty space with a heavy heart. Ilya's memory remained like a wound in his heart. At that moment, he realized once more how powerful a human can be, while also being emotional and fragile. But the greatest surprise awaited Gray when he returned to his ship. Where Ilya had disappeared, a small light spark appeared. This spark marked the beginning of a new life form spreading across the galaxy. Ilya was not just a baby but the seed of new life. This was an event that would forever change Gray's and humanity's future. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, see you in the next story.